going. It was so funny because I was living on Wall Street, and everything was happening and stuff. But then I didn't realize that they were filming the third Batman, so they didn't tell us. And I come down, and I lived on the part of the street where the big battle with Bane happens, and I'm walking down my elevator, and you have the glass doors, and I come out the elevator and I'm walking down the hallway, and I just see hundreds of people running and cops running the other way, and I was like, what? And I backed up against the wall, and then I saw a production assistant in the lobby, and she was like, oh, hold on, and then I put it together, and I was like, oh, thank God this is a movie.
Well, yeah, there's a little bit of, I think collective PTSD. I'm from California originally, and my first time visiting the city at all, I was flying in, I think, do you remember the big blackout of around 2003?
Yeah, I was living in Flushing. I was living in Flushing when that happened, yeah.
So I was visiting a friend who lived out here, and, this is, I'm going to make us sound like the old men that we are, but this was in the days before every airplane had Wi-Fi, right? So you just flying to LA, from LA to New York, 6 hours of nothing. And then we're approaching LaGuardia, and the entire airport is just pitch black. Mm-hmm. And so naturally, the woman behind me starts screaming, "There's been a terrorist attack," because that's
how that mean, yeah.
And that would have been 7-8 years later, but even now, it's for a good reason. If something like that happens, that's immediately where your brain goes to.
Anything big scale like that, yeah, it's crazy. So, but I was. All Staten Islanders, I think, eventually either end up on Long Island or New Jersey. They make a left or a right, So I have one sister that lives in Jersey, and my other sister lives out on Long Island as well. So I ended up out here when I had the family. I was like, my wife Bessie saw somebody going down the subway steps with a stroller, and she was like, "This is not for me." She's like, "I got to get to the burbs. Could we find a house?"
I either have to get more upper body strength,
yeah, or just it's so stressful, going down steps carrying apparatus and your child. It's it couldn't be worse.
I mean, New Yorkers are pretty nice, and people will generally help you, but you don't want to have to rely on a complete stranger to help you carry your baby down a flight of stairs.
And it's just a thing where you're going to get to midday, you'll get to one of the biggest staircases, and there just won't be anybody around. You're like, oh, what am I going to do here?
For all of the nicest of New Yorkers, I think I could still say we have a habit of just, putting our head down and moving on with the day.
We got things to do, baby. We got things to do.
That's been one of the really interesting things for me over the past month, getting used to being in, what is effectively, it's a rural area in a small town. It's just I went to a restaurant and was talking to the waitress and found out she's my neighbor, is realizing that it's great. There's a sense of community, but also I immediately miss the kind of anonymity that you have in the city.
Yeah. Yeah. You could just disappear if you wanted to, but now it's they're like, "Oh, I saw you food shopping. I wouldn't have picked those grapes." Judging you.
I don't know. Before I moved up here, I don't know if you're on Facebook at all. Before I moved up here, I joined all the Facebook groups, just get a feeling, a vibe. There's a lot of Karens and whatever the male equivalent of Karens are, and there's a lot of self-policing happening.
Yeah,
which is good and bad, right?
Mm-hmm, for sure. For sure, they keep you in line. I like that part of the community thing. So when we started our dog rescue out on Long Island, for real, it was so we had our dog rescue running out of our house, and I was like, you know what, we should get in the community a little bit. It'd be nice to have just an adoption center where people could come see the dogs and whatnot. So I went into the real estate around here and be whatever, and I just picked up this little across from one of the best delis where I go for lunch all the time, adjacent to the flower shop. They had a little space I started renting, and so now I have a storefront in the community, which is so funny because people will either just come by and see me in the store and then be like, because they don't put it together, or it's they know I'm there and it's oh, I could come, they come and see me, So it's really interesting piece of that. But I enjoy it. I really because I think kids change it all too, right? You're friends with the parents, the school, you get involved and all that. I think that really, my kids are 9 and 7 right now. So it's really fourth grade, second grade, really into the whole, they're making their friends. You wonder who their friends are and stuff like that.
I don't have children myself, but I assume that there's a lot of forced friendship that has to happen 100%. Between you and other parents.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the wife picks, the friends the friend group, and then you got to hope you click with the husband. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot going on.
You seem like an affable guy, though. I mean, you strike me as somebody who's probably generally pretty easy to get along with. Would you say?
Yeah, I would say that. I'm I think it's just time. I'm not really around as for those things. But then like during the week now, so now that my life is taking a change, and I'm basically touring the weekends. I'm home during the week, so I'll do like school pickup. So I'll just be sitting there with all like the moms and dads hanging out, waiting for a kid to come out and stuff. And it's so funny. You still get it where people walk by me and we're like, are you supposed to be here? Like, what is going on?
But that's what I was going to ask. Like, people coming into the storefront, is it surprise because you're like Joe in the neighborhood, or you're like famous TV guy?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think it's like they don't expect to see me standing there, or and it happens anywhere. Like we'll be in the supermarket shopping and stuff just around town. For the most part, it's faded. I mean, I've been in this neighborhood for I would say like 5 years now, I guess, almost. Yeah, 5 years almost. And so, everything tapers. There used to be people who would drive by my house, slow down, look down the driveway to see if I was like out front, like that. And it would be a little weird and stuff. But, everything tapers, and it's good just to be part of it and know people. But that's the hard part too. Like somebody be like, Joe, and I'm like, do I know this person from? Do they know me? Do I know them? Like that's the hard part.
And you pretend like you do for a little bit until they tell you they're big. Fan,
I mean, my big line is, "There he is." There he is.
Hey guy, buddy.
Because that could go either way. It could go either way. And I'll just wait till what the next sentence is. It's like, oh, I love you. Make me laugh so hard. I'm like, okay, they're a fan.
I have a similar reaction. I'm a journalist, so when I go to conventions and I do I'm not sly at this at all, but my eyes go down to the name tag, to do the double check.
And my reading, I have to wear readers now, so it's raw. I have to like pick it up and be like, who's this? Like if it's a lanyard, I'm like still poking at it.
Yeah. Or God, remind me how to pronounce your name again, and they're like Joe Smith.
It's like Frank Thomas.
I played baseball for the White Sox.
I'm like, I have a friend who pronounces it Frank.
Exactly.
So I just want to make sure I was saying it correctly.
Yeah, he's Austrian. Yeah, there's a funny story in the stand-up, and I point this out because I feel like this is probably speaks to a lot of experiences that you've had over the years since the show started, where I think your dog gets away from you and you end up at this very attractive family's home. But the first thing that he asks you is, well, he thinks he's being set up.
Yeah.
And that must be like that's another level of weirdness on your celebrity encounter that people think they're being fucked with.
Yeah, for sure. I remember I famously tell the story about how I was in Target once and I was looking for paper towels, and I asked this little old lady, she got a red vest on, she's stocking shelves, and I say, excuse me, miss, could you tell me where the paper towels are? Targets are huge. I'm like, could you tell me where the paper towels are? And she just starts slowly backing away from me as if I had a weapon and was like, you're not getting me, Joe. And she started, no. And she was waving her finger, and then she like literally started like lightly jogging away from me, and I was on the other end caps, and I'm just yelling at her down. It looked like a cartoon. I'm yelling at her down the aisles. I'm like, I just need paper towels. Like, and I was like, she's like, no. So yeah, it's interesting when I need help. We used to joke, but because we used to joke about how like, I was used to be really much bigger and unhealthier, but Sal was always like, oh, hope you don't ever have a heart attack out in public. People would be like, ha, you're not getting me, buddy.
I mean, that's a joke, but like,
right.
That could 100% happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I hope not.
No, but have you ever, have you pretended to have a life-threatening situation on the show? Has that happened?
No, I didn't pretend. Okay. I had a really bad sugar crash once, and I had to bring the medic in. But it was during one of the other guys' turns, and I made him keep going because I was like, "This will be funny. Like it'll be fun." I was like, I knew I was okay. I knew I wasn't like I just got really dizzy or whatever. And they were doing the blood pressure stuff in the back, and they had an ice pack on the back of my neck, and I still have the microphone to tell them what to do. It was really fun. But yeah, I never had a life. The show gave me kidney stones though, actually, because I don't exercise much at all, and especially back when this happened, but they surprised me that I had to do 100 push-ups during an interview, and I just had to get out there, and I couldn't stop, and I could barely do 10 or whatever. And they said you can't stop, whatever. And I was playing a cameraman, so I would have to like put down the camera, whatever. So I end up doing it, and I was so sore, whatever. And then 2 days later, I got a kidney stone, and I went in, and the doctor said to me, he goes, He goes, oh, I said, how do I get kidney stones? He goes, well, did you exert yourself and not hydrate? And I was like, yeah, that's it. And so I was like, the show got me kidney stones.
You were able to do 100 push-ups, though?
Yeah, barely. Yeah, it took me over an hour. It edited it down to like 6 minutes.
That's actually like impressive, though.
Yeah. I mean, towards the end, it kind of was like we were doing comedically too, where I would just like jump my body up, you know, they weren't like proper. So there's probably like 65 over the hour to 70 that were real. And then I probably about, 30 comedic ones.
You said you're in better shape now than you had been previously. You talk a little bit about, going to the doctor and everything. What have you been doing to, I guess get healthier?
Well, for me, it's mainly my eating, it's habits, right? It's eating half the plate instead of the full thing. That was always a thing. It's like, I would keep eating when I was full, and also timing. Like I try not to eat past 7 p.m. as best I can now, which is a little bit harder on the road. But, I try to stop eating at like past 7. And just that in itself, I could see the change like instantly, and maybe I'll just skip like desserts for like a week. I go in and out of being vegan because it makes me just feel healthier. So I'll go full vegan for like a month or so at a time. I did it once for like 7 months. I just did it for the past 2 months. I just dove back in. I'll go pescatarian. I don't eat meat, but I'll come back and forth between that because that helps me like reset my system. I feel like better. So. But I was like, at my heaviest, I was like almost 230 pounds, which is huge for me. And now I always waver around, I'm 5'10", so it's not good. You could always tell. And then you see yourself in high definition on television. It's the worst. So I look back at some seasons. I'm like, oh, man, why didn't anybody tell me?
Why did you continue shooting me in profile?
I wanted bird's eye.
Yeah, exactly. Just Vaseline up the lens as much as possible. Yeah, I wonder. So I have a Jewish mom, so I got a little bit of this, but I wonder how much of eating your whole plate is sort of like ingrained in you growing up.
I think for sure. It's like definitely brought into to us to clear your plate. I also eat really fast because my parents. So I had the 2 biggest backyards on Staten Island. So all our friends used to play in me and my next door neighbor's Jason Joseph's backyard. And my dad was super cool. He was just like, "All right, Joe, come in to eat," and then he wouldn't send all the kids home. He's like, "You guys could just keep playing." So I'd be sitting there. I would go in my kitchen, which was right on the house, right? I'd hear and the windows would be open because it's the summer. And I'd hear all these kids play and laugh. And I would just come in, scoff down my stuff as fast as I could. And then like, "Can I be excused?" My dad would like, "No, sit with the family in a minute." And, you just want to get outside. I want to finish my Brussels sprouts. I want to get outside and finish this game of Manhunt, So that also is a thing in me. So I eat fast and a lot.
I come from a family of fast eaters, so I had that because they used to make fun of me when I would always be the last to finish. So I became a fast eater, and it's there's something that happens, and just as you get older, where you start to, I'm not. I promise I'm not going into full therapy mode, but in therapy they call it core beliefs, where you start to sort of like challenge these things that you've taken for granted your entire life. Like even finishing a plate of food, you're like, oh, you don't. Oh. People get takeout. Like this is a thing that I can actually do.
Yeah. You stop when you're full. Yeah, kind of thing. It's definitely interesting. Finish your plate. I think is definitely a generational thing, right? All the mothers being like this. There's kids in Africa that can't eat because and you're not going to finish your rice. Like it's like stuff like that. You get that all the time. It'd be like just moms. I think were very big on. Because it was expensive, too, to feed your family, and money was always tight, growing up. So it was like to throw food away felt like such a waste,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sort of generational, too, from the standpoint of like, my grandfather used to, I guess it was China when they were younger. They used to say they're starving kids in China. I think anybody with like any proximity to the Depression.
Right.
You've got this sort of like generational thing that's instilled in you.
100%. It's like you're throwing away money, right?
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
when you need it, you're literally throwing away money. Yeah.
When did you go vegetarian?
Vegetarian, I met a cow named Caesar at this place, Woodstock Farm Sanctuary, which is not too far from
Not far from me, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic place. So they do this thing every year called Thanksgiving, where you go up and feed the turkeys, which is funny. So you go and feed the turkeys, and it's like a little ceremony thing, and then you hang out. And it's like it's one of their big fundraisers. It's really nice, but they give you a tour of the place. And I walked into, during the tour, we walked into the barn, and here walked over this 800-pound gorgeous, huge cow named Caesar, who was like 8 feet tall. And he walked up to me. And I was like, whoa. And he just walked up and like put his head down. And I just started petting him like a dog. And he nuzzled in and was like, I was like, and I wasn't, my wife was already vegetarian at this point. So I was, and I do the cooking. She doesn't. So it was like, I wasn't like cooking steaks all the time. I wasn't really, we were eating a lot of just like fish and not, meat anyway. And I was like, all right, I don't really have to eat meat anymore. And, and from that moment on, that was the last time I had meat. And I don't really miss much of it. I grew up on prosciutto and mozzarella sandwiches, though, so that gets a little tough sometimes when those are hanging around. And a buffalo wing, I miss a good buffalo chicken wing. But besides that, it wasn't that hard a transition. Again,
I lived in the city for a long time, so I didn't have dogs, but I have a rabbit that I rescued. And I've had a few rabbits over the years, and that for me, I'm like, you know what? If I can form an emotional bond with this creature, it's just not fair. And like, and you met a cow, and my understanding is that pigs are like pretty close to dogs.
Yeah, they had them there too. It was crazy. And they get so much bigger when they're not in captivity that you don't realize when they're not getting slaughtered. Like you think how big a pig is, it's quintuple the size of what you think. Like it's nuts. They're just huge and just awesome. Like their personality is really, really fun too. But I got a rescue rabbit too. So part of my rescue, Brookie is our rescue rabbit. We got here at Gatto Pups and Friends. We have that's one of the end friends. we have a rabbit we rescued.
They don't get food names.
Brookie, a cookie and brownie mix. That's a dessert.
Okay.
But she was also found in Lynbrook, Long Island, so it just worked on 2 levels.
What are your impressions of having a rescue rabbit?
It's really interesting because my daughter loves her, and she is super friendly. So I think what happened, I think she was owned and escaped. This seems to be the situation. They found her on the highway. So I think she just
either escaped or the thing that I discovered living in the city is that people they'll see a park and they'll be like, oh, I'll just like when they want to get rid of it, they'll just stick it in a park or something.
Yeah. But they're interesting. It's very much puppy-like, a lot of energy, likes to be held and pet and played with. My daughter, we buy the big carrots and she'll hold it and just talk to it. And as it eats the carrot, it's really cute. So it's nice to have one. I don't know if I could have a lot though. They're but I can't do like I do with the dogs. We have too many. So, and when the dogs go out and like run by we have a cage and outdoor play area for her to run around in. So they'll run by, and if she's out, they'll all just like stop at the gate and they'll go, and she'll just go up nose to nose with them and they'll just like sniff her and see what's up. It's really, really funny.
Dogs are just generally a lot more social, so you can have a lot of dogs. You can't really.
Yeah, it's a pack mentality in my house. I mean, I have 11 dogs that are mine. So for the Gatto pups that are ours, there's 11. And you open the door, let them out. They all run to where they go. Time to eat, they all go to where they have to go. Time to go to bed, they all get in their little spots. It's it really is like a interesting thing to see.
What does that mean they're ours? Like you have yours that you adopted and they're separate from the agency or whatever?
They're not up. Yeah, they're not up.
They're not up for adoption.
Yeah, so okay. Gatto pups, there's 11 that are ours, Gatto pups, and friends are the ones that are everything that's available for adoption. So we put that little disclaimer on it. So, so right now, the end friends can range anywhere from 4 to 15 dogs, depending on where we're at. Like right now, we're pretty heavy. We're at like 14 dogs, I think, that are available for adoption, either that stay with us here at the sanctuary or are in fosters. So it gets interesting when they're all out at the same time, because I have a dog run in my backyard that's fenced in between, and the end friends have one part and ours have the other. So sometimes we'll have a bunch of dogs out there together and all playing and stuff. It's cool to see.
Does either you or your wife have like a moratorium on you're already in the double digits, like at a certain point?
We're at capacity. Yeah.
11, you think is?
Yeah. Well, we actually had 10 and I just took one from and made it an upstairs dog, because that's the promotion my daughter has given them, an upstairs dog. Chestnut we had rescued this pack. We met this woman in a Panera parking lot. She had escaped a situation at home, driven up from Florida, and took her dog. So this was the father of 5 younger dogs. They were puppies. They were almost a year. So we were able to get all the pups taken care of. The father found a home, went somewhere. It didn't work out, so they brought him back because he needed an eye surgery. So then we gave him the eye surgery. When he came back to the house again, he just fell asleep by my feet. And I was like, oh, and he was like comfortable, and he had been through a lot. I was like, he got along with everybody. He's smaller. little Chihuahua mix. He's nice enough. Everybody likes him. So I was like, all right, what's 11, a 10 and a half, so
you keep saying that. And, all of a sudden you've got an arc.
But before that we hadn't taken another one in a long time. We hadn't taken one in a couple of years. So it doesn't happen that often. That's
the thing. I had an ex, and there's a big SPCA kill shelter in 110th, like up in Harlem, and she was thinking about buying a dog, and I said, "That's great. Just I need you to be like aware of the fact that you're not going to leave this place without having adopted one, because I know you know what I mean? And it's not like a lot of people can kind of just go shopping and, and that's the thing is, like, at a certain point you do have to sort of, you almost have to like set limits for yourself, but realizing like at a certain point, like it's probably not healthy to go past a certain number of dogs in a house, right?
For sure. Yeah, you want to be fair to them too. Like that's the big thing. Like as long as they get along, right? Because you want them all to be comfortable in their house, and they have their little cliques. There's Napoleon and Cupcake love to play together. Strufel is the big girl who sits by herself, and then she'll come out for when it's time for a treat, and she just like lumbers around. We have some of the older ones that are the OGs that we've had forever that are just tight because they've been together for the past 7 or 8 years. So it's definitely an interesting kind of thing to see. When my wife and I separated for a couple of years, I took 2 of the dogs with me that were kind of my dogs, that very much mine, and they were with me. And it was interesting to see. At first, they missed, like, in the apartment, they were kind of like, where is everybody? And then eventually they were like, when I came home, like to have dinner here, and then when I would take them with me, and then I would leave with them, they'd be like by the door, like, are we ready to go? I've had enough of this craziness. Let's go. So it was interesting to see.
They adapt pretty quickly.
For sure. Yeah.
Again, talking of compounding things on top of other things, like going through a separation is difficult enough, but to have that happen and almost like obviously, you're a well-known person. It kind of happened in a high-profile way, and then my understanding is it coincided with you leaving the group too. I mean, that must have been an incredibly difficult time for everybody involved, but especially you, because these are, work and your friends, like those are the things that you fall back on, and all of a sudden, it all kind of
really have neither of them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I equated it to like, it was just like everything piles on top of you. And then, how do you get out of something you're under? You can't just stand up when you're buried, right? You have to start moving piece by piece. And that's what I started to do. I was like, okay, what do we need to fix here? What can we do to make things happen and go? But first and foremost, I had to pay the bills, right? It was like, okay, the bills keep coming. So like, what are we doing here to provide for my family?
Television show, even basic cable TV shows are quite lucrative, is my understanding.
Yeah, when you're in your 9th season of them, for sure. In the beginning they're not, but by the time you get there, it's pretty good. So that was like the first thing I had to figure out. I was like, okay, what's the day job now? Like, what do we do? And then, okay, now that we have that done, how do we fix the pieces that aren't working in our life? And and it's really easy to think about all the time when it's it's the first time living alone. I'm 46 years old, sitting alone in an apartment, that doesn't even have anything hanging on the walls, that I just barely had to move into. So it's like, there's nothing like a wake up call like that. So
it's depressing.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely the hardest part of my journey so far in life was definitely, there. But, you get through, you get resilient, you lean on who you lean on. People show up for you, and, you take it day by day, and eventually you get to a spot where you're okay. So,
and that was also during the pandemic.
Right after, yeah.
Yeah, well, 2021.
It's going into 2021, yeah. I feel like it's all during, yeah.
That was definitely during, which again, like I had my own issues, and it's just like, I think everybody who went through that, obviously, again, like collective trauma for just about everyone, and you definitely don't know where to look to, because it's like everybody, the world seems to be falling apart.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, your go-to people or have their stuff they're going through. So it's interesting. But I mean, I just always come back to the place where, like, as long as you're trying not, as long as you find one person to lean on, I mean, that could always be enough. People always, find your tribe. I was like, but some tribes are just one person sometimes, it's like, really could find your person to help you get through. And I'm very lucky to be extremely tight with my sisters, and had them in my life in a way, and to work it out. But also there's the truth that nobody knows what you're going through, so you gotta really all you can do is rely on yourself. When you talk, you go to therapy and you talk, you figure out what's going on. It's like there's and when it comes down to it, you got to do it. So.
I assume that to a large extent, the guys in the group have been that for you, but there are probably certain things that you can't discuss with them because that's part of kind of the breakup that you're going through at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So they can't really relate to having the whole, you don't have a career anymore, right? It's like, you don't, or that part of your career, right? You don't have that, your main vehicle. So what's going to be a new thing that you do? And also getting out there and also just being a creative person, right? I'm very creative. I'm always thinking of ways to entertain. I love doing it. I love being that for people. I love being the person that gets people through stuff. So as you're going through stuff, I'm out there doing stand up, sitting in the back of my, in my green room before I'm about to go out on this theater stage and just in my head being like, just saying good night to my kids on FaceTime and being like, and then it's like, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Gatto, and like, you got to go out there and do your thing, so it's hard because you want to also, like, I want to be that for people. That's why I'm in entertainment. That's why I do what I do. And I heard the stories from everybody throughout my career about how I've done that for people, getting everybody through loss, cancer, their dogs dying, whatever it is, just all these things and just being there with people. They were in the hospital. Everybody finds us in hospitals and prisons because it's True TV is just
what does that say about you? Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know. So I find people when they're at a low point, people find me and I've been there for them. So it just fed the whole reason why I did it. Very quickly, my career became because of that. Like very quickly, it was like, oh, it had a purpose besides, making money out of doing what I love, which is to have fun with my friends and make people laugh. It was like, oh, there's a purpose behind it where you're, therapeutic a little bit. It's more like, you're bonding families. Like I would hear that all the time. You're the only reason my teenage son hangs out with me. We get to watch your show together. And like, I remember watching Tim Allen and Home Improvement with my father and being, that and loving that show and being out in a grocery store and quoting his lines and, things like that and bonding with my dad over that. So, all that pressure mixed into your world falling apart, it's a lot to handle and you got to process it and take it day by day.
There's a moment in this upcoming special where like you get real earnest there. And then actually it was funny because I was sort of, I was listening to This Morning and I was kind of like doing housework at the same time. And I'm like, is this the end? Like, it sounded, cause you kind of give your pep talk, but it's actually during it. And it's interesting because it's really difficult to mix being funny with being completely earnest. And it seems to me like you made this very deliberate choice to really to stick that moment in there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I joke about it. I say, life suck harder because, it's just something that just got me through. It was, a joke that we did. There was actually a joke, like a thing that happened during, to balance motivation to get people through and then also make people smile with it. And we did this show Dinner Party during COVID. And there was this theme that came up where I started making motivational posters that didn't really necessarily make sense to anybody but me. And it just became a thing. And I'd always make a poster and I'd put it behind me, and I'd be printing out these posters and whatever. And it became a joke, a running joke in the show, but they were kind of come from a place of, oh, this just makes sense to me when I say it in my head. It doesn't necessarily make sense to people, or it sounds like a joke, but you could kind of pull something away from it. So when I make that joke in the show about like life suck harder, it really is just like, it's not easy for anybody. You just got to get through it. And, I felt like I wanted that in the special. I want that to be part of the message for this special because, it really is like a graduation of getting to know me from messing with people. That's the title on purpose, and I start with sharing of how I've always done that and ways I do it, but then taking you through.
And you end with it too. I mean, it's not a theme that ends during the during the routine.
Well, it's me, it's my life. I did this before there's cameras. I'll do it when there's after, it's just part of my personality. It's always how I made my friends laugh is I've always put myself in a weird position and let everybody watch the outcome. Like that's it.
That's a really interesting way of putting it too, because that, I think that separates it from other like hidden cameras or other prank shows, where to a certain extent, it seems like the purpose is making yourself the joke versus making some stranger the joke.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we would stop production multiple times and be like, this isn't working. People are getting mad. Like, I'd be like, cut. I'd be like, Sal, come back here. And we're like, this isn't, what do we got to do different here? What's the move we got to make? Or even when you're out there, you feel it. You're like, the guys will be like, oh, Trey. And we're like, it's not going the way we want it. So let's stop and go. And I remember so many times throughout the show, like you'll see, and then the gold comes. Like we'll stop and be like, we'll play this game. We're playing this game. It's not working. And then we're like, what if we just do this? Or blah, blah, blah. And then go, it's not even necessarily the joke. It's like the overall theme of something, so, and you just got to do the stuff in the right way where like stuff like that could seem like so mean or like weird or hard, like, to make people angry. But if you do it in the right way where it's weird and you're making yourself the butt of the joke. Like I remember when we did a punishment where we made Murr take cigarettes out of people's mouths while they were smoking on their smoking break. And it was like, okay, what's your motivation for doing this? You can't just be a jerk. You have to be like enforcing the law of you got to take care of yourself. Like then it makes it feel like
you'll get punched if you're a jerk too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. There's that. And then that's not what we're looking for. That's nobody wants to watch that. I don't like those kind of pranks. You see all that kind of stuff all the time, like these kids on YouTube and whatnot, where they're like, we do what you do. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't at all. Like you're making people the butt of the joke. And then we'd also get, hey, why don't you ever show the people's reactions? Because they don't realize they're on our hidden camera show, and that means we did our right thing. They don't realize they're getting pranked. They don't realize when we're done, they should just be like, oh, that guy was weird, and then we've done our job. If they feel got, or if they feel like that it's like, it's not candid camera, it's our version of it, and we're the butt of the joke. So you are seeing the reactions.
Pragmatically, they're probably not going to sign that release if they feel
We got a couple blurs. We got a couple blurs, but for the most part, those blurs were because, people going through their day to day, they don't want to deal with this bull, or we missed them. It's New York City. They get away in the park. We couldn't find them, so like that kind of stuff happens. But I think there's only been, honestly, a handful of times, like I said, I've over 300 episodes I've done over a decade, of my life. And I can only remember like a handful of times where somebody walked away upset. And that's, there's, thousands of people we've interacted with.
It's kind of the purest form of the idea of not punching down.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've always been in a place where I want to make my comedy, making people not feel divided and not leaving with a bad taste in their mouth. Like it's kind of like, that's where, they shouldn't even be thinking about laughing. They shouldn't be thinking if my type of comedy is if they're thinking about if it's okay to laugh, it's not a joke for me. I'm not necessarily being like, oh, we don't want people. Other people do it very well. I laugh at a lot of comics that do that. It's just not how I do it. It's just not my thing.
Yeah. So I was like going through and reading up a little bit about, some interviews that you did, and I won't name the publication, but I think it might've been a student publication, and it was talking about one of your stand-up sets, and it was like, I'm surprised that he opened with a joke about Joe Biden, but it was just a joke about Joe Biden being sleepier. It's like a thing that everyone can accept now, right? All sides of the political spectrum. But
that wasn't me though. That wasn't me. That was my opener. That was my opener.
Oh, it was your opener. Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah.
So
I know what you're talking about.
That makes more sense.
Yeah,
that makes more sense.
I don't make either. I don't make.
You just wouldn't even you wouldn't even reference like a political.
No, I don't know anything about politics either. It doesn't interest me. So like I don't want to get. And then why even open that can of worms? I think I think I even had like a joke that was like not even the punchline wasn't Trump or anything, and it was just like it could kind of be interpreted that way, and I didn't think the joke was that good anyway, so I'll take it out. Why keep it? So like I don't think it's just not it's not something material. Right, you're always funniest when you're talking about stuff and I'm very much a storyteller. Like all my thing, I mean, you've seen the special, and it's story based. And my new hour, the new Let's Get Into It tour is story based. It's stories about how I became the guy I am. Telling stories about from my childhood, growing up, how my parents, and then all my journey through it, literally through college, and then on the show, how things that have happened there, and then now being a parent. It's all stories because that's the kind of comic I am.
The tour that you're on now. I mean, is it? Obviously, you write what you know and all of that. You've been off the show for a couple of years now, and you were full-time parenting. So has that taken more of a front seat in terms of the subject matter for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my kids are hysterical. Like you have so much fun, and it's kind of relatable to people, even if they're not a parent. Because I'm taking it through the lens of also being a child. we've all been children, so it's kind of like what Mike.
Some of us still are.
At 100%. I mean, here I am. Some of us make a good living by it, so I think that's part of it. But yeah, for sure. Like, I've also had time to reflect and think about that kind of stuff. Like, and I haven't really spoken about my dad much in any of my stuff. And my dad is a huge part of my life. I lost him when I was 19, and he had the most impact on my life of any person. And, I only had him for 19 years. And I was like, oh, I should think about his impact and talk about that. And it unearthed a lot of funny things. Like, I remember one of the stories I talk about, I hadn't even said out loud. And now it's one of my favorite parts of the new show. And it's just like, oh, wow. Like, just when you sit in the quiet and think about what you want to talk about. And that's part of it.
You went to school to be an accountant, correct?
Yeah,
you're a math guy. You
mentioned
you're a math guy.
I'm a mathlete, baby. Yeah, that's here I am.
Again, you unfortunately lost your father at a young age, but what did your mother and what did your family members think of this career trajectory?
Super supportive. I have super supportive family. So my mom was around for season 1 of Joker. She passed away early in season 2. She didn't see it air, but she was around for season 1, and she was just like a peacock, man, on Staten Island, telling everybody, my son's on television, one of those. She's really, really great. But
she's a stage mom.
Yeah, like a stage mom. But she was like, she would come to my improv shows in the city. There was 50 people in the audience, and my mom would be there. We used to rehearse in her basement. I used to live in her basement, and Sal, Murr, and Q used to come over, and we used to rehearse improv in her basement. And, and she would just find a reason to be downstairs doing laundry or whatever, and I could hear her listening. And, she was just always my number one fan. An advocate. And I remember when I told her in 2003, I moved to LA to chase the dream, to become a writer and director. And she was like, I said, hey, Mom, I'm going to go to LA. And she's like, when? I'm like, in 2 weeks. Like, I'd already set everything up. I had a friend who was living out there, and she wasn't using her place for the next 2 months. So I could go stay there for free and then find a place, I didn't know anybody, get it together and figure it all out. And she was like, all right. She goes, and when are you coming back? And I said, well, I don't know. And she goes, well, just do me a favor. She's like, be honest with yourself. And if you feel like it's not working, and being away from it's got to be more important than being away from your family. Cause I was very tight with my nephews, and I had nephews at the time. I think my niece was born too. And it was very much like, okay, so it's got to be more important, or you got to be enjoying it more than knowing how much I enjoy my family. You need to be enjoying what you're doing more, give it its time, but there's going to be a point when you're going to have an honest look at yourself and be like, it's time to come home. So
when did you come home?
My grandmother had passed away, and my mom and grandma had became widows together within 3 days. So they had become the widows together, and they best friended it up like a kind of a Golden Girls situation. It was very funny. And she was living across the street, very tight with her. And I was very tight with my grandma. And when I came home for the wake, I said to my mom, I said, you know what? Maybe I'll come home for a little bit. And she started sobbing and hugging me and said, thank you. And I was like, okay, I guess I am. And then I came back home, and that's when I reunited with the guys. We got some stuff going on pretty quickly. And I was like, I said, you know what? Maybe it's not where you are, it's who you're with. So let me see what we could do here. And we got our success, and it started right there. It's not where you are, it's who you're with, but also, and I'm not casting aspersions, but you weren't in like bumfuck Kansas. Yeah, it's New York City. You know what I mean? It's for sure. This is, stuff happens there. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, sure. It's also like, I think, we started and got a lot of exposure on the internet where people didn't have exposure to comedy of our type or whatnot. So I think we caught fire a little bit that way too, which helped. We started when MySpace and YouTube homepages, the algorithm was a person. They were deciding what goes on there. And for some reason, we clicked with the homepage editor of YouTube that really enjoyed our stuff. And we ended up on the homepages of MySpace, YouTube a lot. And it just started catching fire that way. And we started to get some notoriety and entering some online contests, and, the snowball effect happened. But, when you get your stuff in front of people and people react to it in a good way, like, it makes everything easier. But it's something that I've been thinking about in my own life, as you probably have surmised from this conversation. Like, I can be jokey. I find humor to be a good way to relate to people that I don't know. Obviously, our jobs are different in that there's a certain amount of it's not necessarily my job to be funny. But I had a moment a few years ago, and I was talking to a colleague, and I said, do you think that I would be further along in my career if I was less jokey, if my immediate reaction wasn't always to make things funny? And I'm kind of curious, like, in your own life,
a little probably less professionally, but certainly, you know, I know you went through some struggles with your relationship that you just talked about. Has it been, how much of sort of the learning process and the maturing process is really figuring out when to be funny and when to be serious about things?
I think there's a time for both, but I think if you're looking at something through the lens of humor, you're doing a little bit of protection of your own mental health and psyche, which I think is as important as worrying about somebody else. And as with everything, it's a little bit of balance. Like for me, I know the type of things that you're referring to, like where people would just not take something serious and laugh it off. That wasn't the issue I was going through. My issue that I was going through was, where was my focus and distracting myself, like, and working, you know, not being present when I should have been, and that kind of thing. But I have never been that type of guy that was like afraid to get serious. Like people, the thing that I get, which is hard for me, is when I get serious, and we touched on this earlier, when I'm getting serious, people think I'm joking, and I have to be like, I'm serious, like kind of thing, you know. But I've always found that there's a time to be serious. And when there's a time to be serious, it normally is that somebody needs that from you. And you need to be aware enough that it's time to be serious. And I think that's important. And I joke about everything. I mean, I remember, you know, when one of my good friends, you wait, one of my good friends' parents died. And I was, you know, it only took me like a day to be like, what are you, jealous? Yeah, I couldn't have the only dead parent, like that kind of thing. Like it was like that kind of, and it was like, you know, I'll joke about anything and everything. I don't think that matters.
But again, that was sort of redirecting it to yourself to a certain extent.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. But I think that's it. Like you just, because people expect it from you too, right? What are you to your people is very important. If somebody's coming to you to talk to you about something serious, do they want you to solve it, or do they want you to help you get through it by laughing about it with you? Right. So I find myself being that person for a lot of people. People going through some heavy stuff don't even necessarily need my input. They need my hype man skills to get them through it and bear it by being like, okay, you know what? Yeah, this is terrible. You should just, you know, you should move, you know, like that kind of thing. So yeah, but I don't have that issue that you're referencing, but the people that do, I would just always say, if somebody's coming to you and wants you to be serious about something, if they're important to you, be serious.